Chapter 1, Message from the Shadows. The email slithered into my inbox at 2:37 a.m., its sharp chime slicing through the suffocating silence of my Paris apartment like a shard of glass scraping bone. I was awake, as always, my eyes stinging from the cold blue glow of my laptop, fingers trembling over a half-finished exposé on corruption in the city's art restoration underbelly. The subject line was an empty void, a black hole of intent, and the sender's address a chaotic snarl of letters and numbers reeked of deliberate anonymity, like a whisper from the dark web. My cursor trembled over the delete button, my pulse thudding in my throat. As an investigative journalist, I'd learned anonymous emails were venomous, traps sprung by vengeful sources, trolls, or the rare, chilling threats from those I'd unmasked. But this one sank icy tendrils into my chest, a primal dread curling like smoke around my ribs. I clicked. The screen flickered, a sickly stutter, and an image clawed its way into view, a photograph of an ancient book, its leather cover charred and fissured, as if it had been torn screaming from a pyre's heart. Symbols were gouged into its spine, pulsing with a feverish, phosphorescent glow, like the bioluminescent lures of creatures that hunt in the ocean's blackest trenches. Below the image, a single line of French text burned into my retinas: En cherche pas la bibliothèque sous Paris, etc. Don't look for the library beneath Paris, it will kill you. My breath snagged, jagged and shallow, as the air in my apartment thickened, heavy with the metallic tang of rain-soaked stone and something older, like decayed parchment and forgotten graves. The distant hum of Paris car horns weaving through the night, the low murmur of late-night revelers dissolved into a predatory hush, as if the city itself was holding its breath, watching me. My heartbeat roared in my ears, a primal drumbeat drowning out the world. I zoomed in on the book's symbols, their jagged edges writhing like veins pulsing beneath translucent skin, each curve radiating an unnatural heat that seemed to hum through the screen. They weren't Latin, Greek, or any script I'd unearthed in the dusty archives I'd raided for stories. They were older, raw, as if carved by claws in a time when humanity still cowered from the dark. My phone erupted on the desk, its buzz a wasp sting that made me flinch, my chair creaking like a snapped bone. A text from my editor, Elise, demanding my draft by noon, glowed accusingly on the screen. I ignored it, my fingers already clawing at the keyboard, diving into my work database for any whisper of a library beneath Paris. The results were skeletal, mocking, a handful of dry academic papers on the catacombs' limestone bones, a fevered conspiracy blog ranting about secret societies, and a fragmented journal from a 17th century monk named Brother Etienne. His words, scratched in fading ink, spoke of a library of shadows buried beneath the city, guarded by an order that kneeled to neither God nor devil. His final entry was a jagged scream: the books breathe, and their breath is death. A shiver sliced through me, sharp as a blade, my skin prickling as if brushed by unseen fingers. My apartment, a cramped fifth-floor walk-up in Le Marais, felt like a shrinking cage, its clutter of dog-eared books, crumpled notepads, and cold coffee mugs pressing in like silent conspirators. The radiator in the corner hissed, a serpentine rasp that slithered through the quiet, its heat sour with the scent of rust and despair. The wooden floor groaned under my weight, each creak echoing like a heartbeat from some unseen beast lurking beneath the boards. I opened my email contacts, my fingers slick with sweat, and scrolled to Julien Lefebvre, a historian who'd been my ally on a story about stolen artifacts last year. Julien was a bloodhound for lost knowledge, his mind a labyrinth of medieval manuscripts and forgotten truths. But he'd gone silent, missing our last 2 coffee meetups, his absence a gnawing void that tasted of ash. I typed a message, my hands unsteady, got a strange email about a library under Paris. Know anything? I attached the book's photo and hit send, the mouse's click sharp as a guillotine in the stillness. Minutes crawled by, each one heavy with the weight of waiting. No reply. I scoured Julien's social media, a desolate wasteland save for a single post from 3 weeks ago, a grainy photo of a Parisian sewer grate, its iron bars twisted like the gnarled fingers of a corpse, captioned, "Some doors should stay locked." My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. Julien wasn't one for cryptic riddles, he was the kind who catalogued his life with the precision of a monk. I dialed his number, the phone's cold glass pressing against my ear. Voicemail. His voice: "Bonjour, this is Julien, leave a message." Was a cruel burst of warmth, like sunlight glimpsed before a storm swallows it whole. I returned to the email, the book's image searing itself into my vision until my eyes throbbed. I opened it in editing software, cranking the brightness until the symbols seemed to writhe, their edges sharp as shattered obsidian, glinting with a malevolent life. One symbol, a circle cleaved by a jagged scar, stirred a memory I couldn't grasp, like a nightmare half remembered in the morning's haze. I sketched it on a notepad, my pen scratching like claws on stone, each stroke trembling with a dread I couldn't name. The clock on my wall ticked past 3 a.m., its hand slicing through the night with surgical precision, the sound a relentless drip of dread. Sleep was a distant dream, my mind a maelstrom of questions. I flung open my window, and the October air roared in, sharp with the scent of wet cobblestones, rotting leaves, and the faint, acrid bite of diesel. The street below was a ribbon of shadow, empty save for a lone figure beneath a street lamp, their hooded silhouette carved from the darkness, motionless as a predator sizing up its prey. Their face was a void, but I felt their gaze, a weight that pressed against my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I blinked, and they were gone, swallowed by the night's hungry maw. A trick of exhaustion, I told myself, but my pulse hammered like a trapped animal's. I hacked into our shared work drive, ethics be damned, my fingers shaking as I unearthed Julien's last report. It was a fractured mosaic of notes about a forbidden archive beneath Paris, tied to a group called L'Ordre des Ombres. He'd written of a sealed tunnel near Notre Dame, rumored to cradle texts that should not exist. His final note, scrawled in a frantic hand, read, "The books are calling me. I can't stop." The words burned, each one a splinter under my skin. My throat was dry, coated in the taste of ash and fear. I checked my email again, half expecting another message to materialize, but the inbox was a barren wasteland. Just that cursed image and its warning, clawing at my mind like a beast scratching at a door. I thought of Julien's silence, the monk's journal, the figure in the street, each a thread in a tapestry of dread. Every nerve screamed to delete the email, slam my laptop shut, and bury myself in the false safety of sleep. But I'm a journalist. Curiosity is my damnation. If Julian had found that library, if he'd paid with his life, I needed to know the truth. I grabbed my coat, its wool heavy with the damp chill of the night, and a flashlight, its weight solid but cold in my hand. I downloaded a catacombs map from an old article I'd written about illegal explorers, their tales of whispers in the dark now slithering through my mind like serpents. The email's warning gnawed at me, a cold blade twisting in my gut, but I shoved it down. Julian might be out there, lost in that labyrinth of shadows. And that book, its glowing symbols, its promise of forbidden truth sang to me, a siren's call I couldn't resist. I left my apartment, the door's lock snapping shut like the crack of a breaking bone. The stairwell was a spiral of darkness, each step groaning as if the building itself wept in warning. The air grew colder as I descended, thick with the scent of mildew and something sharper, like blood long spilled. The city's pulse faded into a silence that pulsed with life, a predator's breath lurking just beyond my sight. Somewhere beneath Paris, a library waited, its books exhaling death. And I was plunging into its jaws. If you received a message like that, would you dare to chase its shadows, or would you flee before they claimed you? Chapter 2, The First Trace. The stairwell's chill clung to my skin as I stepped into the pre-dawn streets of Le Marais, the air thick with the sour bite of wet cobblestones and the faint, cloying sweetness of rotting leaves piled in gutters. My flashlight's beam sliced through the dark, catching glints of frost on the pavement, each crystal winking like a conspirator's eye. Paris was still asleep, its pulse a low thrum of distant traffic and the occasional clink of bottles from a late-night cafe. But the email's warning "En cherche pas la bibliothèque, l'Étera" slithered through my mind, its words a cold blade pressed against my thoughts. Julian's absence gnawed at me, his cryptic post about locked doors echoing like a funeral bell. I needed answers, and the only place to start was his last known haunt, the Musée Carné Villette, where he'd been digging through Revolutionary-era documents. The museum was a 20-minute walk, but the streets felt alive, predatory, as if the shadows themselves were watching. A street lamp flickered as I passed, its buzz a dying insect swine, casting jagged pools of light that seemed to twist and writhe. My boots scraped against the uneven pavement, each step a gritty rasp that echoed too loudly in the silence. I clutched my phone, Julian's sewer grate photo glowing on the screen, its iron bars twisted into a snarl that seemed to pulse with the same sickly glow as the book's symbols. My thumb traced the jagged circle I'd sketched, its shape burning into my memory like a brand. Was it a warning, a key, or something worse? The Musée Carné Villette loomed ahead, its Renaissance facade a mask of elegance hiding centuries of secrets. The night guard, a grizzled man with a face like weathered leather, barely glanced at my press pass before waving me through the service entrance. The air inside was stale, heavy with the musty scent of old paper and polished wood, undercut by a faint metallic tang, like blood left to dry. Julian's office was on the third floor, a cramped room buried in the archives wing, its door slightly ajar, spilling a sliver of fluorescent light that flickered like a dying pulse. I hesitated, my breath fogging in the chilly air, the silence so thick it felt like a weight on my chest. Inside, the room was a chaos of history. Stacks of manuscripts teetered on a desk, their pages yellowed and curling like ancient skin. A coffee cup sat abandoned, its contents crusted into a dark ring that smelled faintly of mold. The walls were plastered with maps of Paris, some modern, others hand-drawn from the 1700s, their lines weaving like veins beneath the city's surface. My flashlight swept the room, catching glints of dust motes dancing in the beam, each one a tiny, ghostly eye. Julian's laptop was open, its screen dark but warm to the touch, as if it had been used moments ago. I pressed the power button, and the machine hummed to life, its fan wheezing like a labored breath. The desktop was a maze of folders, each labeled with Julian's meticulous precision: Revolution Diaries, Catacomb Surveys, L'Ordre d'Ambers. My heart lurched at the last one. I clicked it, and a single document appeared, titled The Library Beneath. The file was a patchwork of notes, scans of medieval texts, and grainy photos of tunnels carved from limestone, their walls etched with symbols that matched the book from the email. One passage, highlighted in red, read, "The library is no myth. It holds the sins of humanity, bound in leather and blood. L'Ordre d'Ambers guards it, but the books call to those who seek truth." They called to me. The words ended abruptly, as if Julian had been interrupted mid-thought. A chill slithered down my spine, sharp as a needle. I scrolled further, finding a scanned page from a 17th century journal, the same Brother Etienne I'd read about hours ago. His handwriting was frantic, ink splattered like blood across the page. "The library is alive. Its shelves groan under the weight of forbidden knowledge. The books whisper, and those who listen are never seen again." Below the scan, Julian had scribbled, "Found the entrance. Notre Dame, North Crypt, sealed gate." The symbols are real. My pulse quickened, a drum beat echoing in my skull. Notre Dame was less than a mile away, its Gothic spires looming over Paris like silent sentinels. I searched the desk, my hands shaking as I rifled through papers, their edges brittle and sharp, slicing tiny cuts into my fingertips. A folded map caught my eye, tucked beneath a stack of books on Parisian folklore. It was old, hand-drawn on parchment that smelled of damp earth and decay, its ink faded but legible. The map traced the catacombs, but not the tourist routes. These were deeper, unmarked tunnels, their paths spiraling like a labyrinth beneath the city. A red X marked a spot near Notre Dame, labeled in Julian's neat script, "Porte d'Ambers, the Gate of Shadows." Next to it, he'd written, "The books know my name." The air grew colder, the room's silence thickening into something tangible, like a hand pressing against my chest. My flashlight flickered, its beam stuttering as if swallowed by the dark. A faint sound, a low, rhythmic scratching, came from behind the desk. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, the taste of dust and fear coating my tongue. I swung the light toward the sound, expecting a rat or a loose pipe, but the beam caught something else, a shadow, too tall, too human, standing in the corner where no one had been a moment ago. Its edges shimmered, like heat rising from asphalt, and its presence felt wrong, as if it were drinking the light from the room. "Julian," I whispered, my voice barely a rasp, swallowed by the oppressive quiet. The shadow didn't move, but I felt its gaze, heavy and unyielding, like a weight crushing my ribs. My flashlight died with a final, pathetic sputter, plunging the room into darkness so complete it seemed to pulse with intent. The scratching grew louder, closer, a clawing rhythm that mimicked my heartbeat. I fumbled for my phone, its screen casting a feeble glow, and backed toward the door, my boots scuffing against the floor's gritty surface. The shadow was gone when I looked again, but the air was heavier, laced with a sour, organic stench, like flesh left to rot in a sealed crypt. I grabbed the map and Julian's laptop, stuffing them into my bag, my hands slick with sweat that smelled faintly of copper. The scratching stopped, replaced by a low hum, almost a voice, whispering words I couldn't quite catch, like a conversation heard through a wall. I stumbled out of the office, the door slamming shut behind me with a crack that echoed like a gunshot in the empty museum. The guard didn't look up as I passed, his face half hidden in shadow, but I swore his eyes glinted with something unnatural, like oil on water. Outside, the Paris dawn was breaking, a sickly gray light filtering through clouds that hung low and bruised. The city smelled of rain and secrets, its streets slick with a sheen that reflected the world in distorted fragments. I clutched the map, its parchment crinkling like dry bones, and headed toward Notre Dame. Julian had found something down there, something that had called to him, consumed him. And now it was calling me. If you found a map like that, would you follow its path into the dark, or burn it before it claimed you? Chapter 3, The Warning Ignored. The dawn light bled through Paris's bruised clouds, casting a pallid glow over the Seine as I approached Notre Dame. The cathedral's Gothic spires pierced the sky like blackened bones, their shadows stretching across the cobblestones, writhing as if alive. The air was sharp, laced with the briny tang of river water and the acrid bite of coal smoke from a distant chimney, stinging my nostrils with each breath. My boots crunched against the frost-dusted pavement, the sound a brittle snap that echoed in the stillness, as if the city itself was whispering warnings I refused to hear. Julian's map, tucked inside my coat, felt heavier than parchment should, its edges pressing against my chest like a cold hand. The words from his note, "The books know my name," slithered through my mind, each syllable a needle pricking my resolve. But I was a journalist, and the truth, no matter how jagged, was my obsession. I crossed the Pont au Double, the bridge's iron railing slick with dew that clung to my fingers like a lover's reluctant touch. The Seine below churned sluggishly, its surface reflecting the cathedral in fractured, oily shards, as if the river itself hid secrets too dark to reveal. My flashlight, now dim from overuse, flickered in my hand, its beam a feeble protest against the encroaching dawn. Julian's map marked the Porte d'Ambers in a crypt beneath Notre Dame, a place sealed since the 17th century, according to his frantic scrawl. I'd been to the cathedral before, chasing stories about its restoration, but never to its underbelly, where history festered like an untreated wound. As I neared the cathedral's north side, a voice cut through the silence, low and gravelly, like stones grinding underfoot. "You shouldn't be here, Clara." I froze, my breath fogging in the air, tasting of frost and fear. The voice belonged to Professor Marcel Dubois, a historian I'd interviewed years ago for a piece on Parisian relics. He stood in the shadow of a gargoyle, his face gaunt, eyes sunken like wells drained of water, glinting with something that wasn't quite human. His coat, threadbare and dusted with ash, hung loosely on his frame, as if he'd been hollowed out. "Marcel," I said, my voice a brittle thread, barely audible over the river's murmur. "What are you doing here?" My hand tightened around the flashlight, its metal casing cold and slick against my palm. He stepped closer, his shoes scraping the cobblestones with a sound like claws on bone. "I know what you're looking for," he said, his breath reeking of damp earth and something sweeter, like rotting fruit. "The library? The books. Julian found them, and now he's gone. You'll be next if you don't turn back." My pulse hammered, a frantic rhythm that vibrated in my skull. Julian's my friend. If he's in trouble, I need to find him. "What do you know about the library?" The map in my coat seemed to pulse, its weight a silent demand to keep moving. Marcel's eyes narrowed, the whites yellowed like old parchment, his pupils darting as if tracking something I couldn't see. "It's no library," he hissed, his voice dropping to a whisper that crawled across my skin like spider legs. "It's a prison. The books hold the sins of the world, bound by l'Ordre des Ombres. They've guarded it for centuries, since the plague years, when Paris burned and the books whispered to the dying. Julian heard them, and they took him. They'll take you too." The air grew colder, the cathedral's shadow swallowing the dawn's light, leaving us in a twilight that smelled of mildew and despair. My throat tightened, the taste of bile rising as Marcel's words echoed Brother Etienne's journal, "The books breathe, and their breath is death." But I'd spent years chasing stories through war zones and corrupt boardrooms. I didn't back down from shadows, no matter how loud they screamed. "What is l'Ordre des Ombres?" I asked, stepping closer, my boots grinding against the frost, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Who are they? And what happened to Julian?" Marcel laughed, a dry, rattling sound like bones clattering in a crypt. "They're the keepers of secrets no one should know. Priests, scholars, murderers bound by a pact older than this cathedral. They watch the library, ensure its books stay silent. But Julian, he opened one. He let it speak. His voice cracked, and he clutched his coat, fingers trembling as if burned. I tried to warn him, just as I'm warning you. The books don't just hold knowledge, they hunger for it. They'll strip your mind bare, Clara, until there's nothing left but their voice." My flashlight flickered again, its beam catching Marcel's face, revealing a scar across his cheek that hadn't been there years ago, its edges jagged like the symbol on Julian's map. My stomach twisted, a cold knot of dread tightening. "Where's the entrance?" I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt, each word tasting of resolve and fear. Marcel pointed toward the cathedral's north wall, where a rusted iron grate was embedded in the stone, half hidden by ivy that curled like skeletal fingers. "The crypt below," he said, his voice a low moan, like wind through a ruined house. "But it's not just a door. It's a mouth. Once you step inside, it swallows you whole." He turned away, his silhouette merging with the shadows, but his final words lingered, heavy as a curse, "Don't let the book see you." I stood alone, the cathedral looming over me, its gargoyles leering with stone eyes that seemed to follow my every move. The air was thick with the scent of river mud and ancient stone, the Seine's ripples whispering secrets I couldn't decipher. My fingers brushed the map in my coat, its parchment crackling like dry skin, urging me forward. Marcel's warning clawed at me, but Julian's absence was a louder call. If he was trapped in that library, if those books had taken him, I couldn't turn back. Not now. I approached the grate, its iron bars cold and slick with moss, their surface etched with faint symbols that matched the ones on the book from the email. My flashlight's beam danced across them, revealing their unnatural glow, a sickly green that pulsed like a heartbeat. The grate was locked, but the mechanism was old, rusted, yielding to the lockpick I carried for stories that required less than legal access. The metal groaned as I pried it open, a low, guttural sound that vibrated through my bones, as if the earth itself protested. Beyond the grate, a stone staircase spiraled downward, its steps slick with condensation, glistening like the throat of some vast, subterranean beast. The air grew heavier, thick with the stench of damp limestone and something sharper, like blood spilled centuries ago. My flashlight barely pierced the darkness, its beam swallowed by shadows that seemed to writhe, alive and hungry. I took a step forward, the map trembling in my hand, Julian's words echoing, "The books know my name." What did they know about me? As I descended, the cathedral's shadow closed around me, the world above fading into a memory. Somewhere below, the library waited, its books breathing, their whispers calling my name. I was walking into a trap, and I knew it. But the truth was worth the risk, or so I told myself. Have you ever ignored a warning that felt too real to dismiss? Share your story in the comments. I want to know what you'd do. Chapter 4, The Door Beneath the Earth. The stone staircase spiraled downward, each step slick with a sheen of condensation that glistened like the skin of some subterranean serpent, swallowing the feeble beam of my flashlight. The air was a suffocating weight, thick with the cloying reek of damp limestone, mildew, and a sharper, coppery tang like blood long congealed in the earth's veins. My boots scraped against the uneven steps, the sound a gritty rasp that echoed in the narrow shaft, as if the walls themselves were grinding their teeth in warning. Julian's map, clutched in my trembling hand, felt alive, its parchment pulsing faintly, as if it breathed in rhythm with the darkness. Marcel's warning, it's a mouth. It swallows you whole, clawed at my mind, each word a splinter burrowing deeper, but I couldn't stop. Julian was down here, somewhere, and the library's secrets were calling me, their whispers a siren's song laced with dread. The staircase descended for what felt like hours, though my phone's clock, flickering in the damp air, claimed only minutes had passed. The temperature plummeted, my breath fogging in clouds that tasted of frost and decay, each exhale curling like a ghost before dissolving into the black. The walls, carved from ancient limestone, were etched with symbols that matched the ones on Julian's map, jagged circles split by scars, glowing with a sickly green luminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. My fingers brushed one, and a jolt shot through me, sharp and cold, as if the stone had bitten my skin. The symbols seemed to writhe under my touch, their edges blurring, whispering words I couldn't understand, like a chorus of voices trapped in a dream. At the bottom of the stairs, the passage opened into a cavernous chamber, its ceiling lost in a void that drank my flashlight's beam. The air here was heavier, pressing against my chest like a hand, its scent now laced with something organic, like flesh left to rot in a sealed crypt. The floor was uneven, littered with shards of bone and stone that crunched underfoot, each sound a snap that echoed into the darkness, unanswered. My flashlight swept the chamber, revealing shelves carved into the walls, stretching into the shadows like the ribs of some colossal beast. The shelves were lined with books, hundreds, thousands, each one bound in leather that looked too supple, too alive, their spines glowing with the same eerie light as the symbols on the walls. I stepped closer, my heart pounding so loud it seemed to shake the air, its rhythm a frantic drum beat against the silence. The books weren't just objects, they radiated a presence, their covers pulsing faintly, as if breathing. Some were blackened, as if scorched by fire, others were pristine, their leather glistening like wet skin. One book, larger than the rest, sat alone on a pedestal in the chamber's center, its cover carved with the circle and scar symbol from Julian's map. The air around it shimmered, like heat rising from a desert road, and a low hum emanated from it, a vibration that crawled up my spine and settled in my skull, whispering my name, Clara. Clara. My mouth went dry, the taste of dust and fear coating my tongue. I reached for the book, my hand trembling, but stopped short, Marcel's warning ringing like a bell in my head. The book's hunger for knowledge. They'll strip your mind bare. I pulled back, my fingers tingling as if burned, and turned to the shelves instead. The books were ancient, their titles written in scripts I couldn't read, some in Latin, others in languages that seemed to twist the eye, their letters curling like tendrils of smoke. One title, faintly legible, read Liber Peccatorum, Book of Sinners. Another, etched in blood-red ink, simply said Vox Mortis, Voice of Death. A faint scratching sound broke the silence, like claws skittering across stone, coming from the shadows beyond the shelves. My flashlight flickered, its beam stuttering as if the darkness itself was choking it. I swung the light toward the sound, my breath catching, expecting a rat or a cave-in, but the beam caught something worse, a figure, too tall, too thin, standing at the edge of the chamber. Its silhouette was wrong, its edges shimmering like a mirage, its presence a weight that pressed against my lungs. It didn't move, but I felt its gaze, cold and unyielding, like a predator sizing up prey. My skin prickled, the air growing sour with a stench like burning hair and rotting meat. "Who's there?" I called, my voice a brittle shard, swallowed by the chamber's oppressive silence. The figure didn't answer, but the scratching grew louder, closer, a rhythmic clawing that synced with my pulse. My flashlight died with a final, pathetic whine, plunging the chamber into darkness so complete it felt like a living thing, wrapping around me like a shroud. I fumbled for my phone, its screen casting a weak, bluish glow, barely enough to illuminate the book on the pedestal. The scratching stopped, replaced by a low, guttural hum, like a voice chanting just beyond comprehension, its cadence pulling at my thoughts, urging me to open the book. I backed away, my boots crunching against the bone-littered floor, each step a jolt that sent shivers up my legs. The map in my hand felt heavier, its parchment now warm, almost feverish, as if it were alive. I unfolded it, my fingers slick with sweat that smelled faintly of copper, and traced Julian's red X. A note in his handwriting, scrawled in the margin, read, "The library is no myth. The books choose who they speak to." I opened one, and it saw me. My stomach twisted, a cold knot of dread tightening. Had Julian stood here, in this chamber, facing the same book, the same whispers? Was he still here, somewhere, trapped by the library's hunger? The hum grew louder, the air vibrating with it, a sound that burrowed into my skull like a worm. The book on the pedestal seemed to pulse faster, its glow intensifying, casting shadows that danced across the shelves, forming shapes that weren't quite human, elongated limbs, eyeless faces, mouths stretched too wide. My phone's screen flickered, the map symbols glowing in sync with the books, as if they were communicating. I stumbled back, my shoulder brushing a shelf, and a book fell, its cover splitting open with a sound like tearing flesh. A faint wail echoed from it, not a sound but a feeling, a wave of despair that clawed at my heart, threatening to pull me under. I turned to run, but the darkness seemed to shift, the chamber's walls closing in, the air thickening until it felt like I was breathing mud. The figure in the shadows moved, its silhouette gliding closer, silent but deliberate, its presence a cold blade against my spine. My phone's light caught a glimpse of its face, or where a face should have been, just a smooth, featureless void, like a mask carved from shadow. I clutched Julian's map, its edges cutting into my palm, and ran toward the staircase, the hum chasing me, growing into a chorus of whispers that screamed my name. As I reached the stairs, the book on the pedestal let out a sound, a low, resonant thud, like a heartbeat from the earth's core. The chamber trembled, dust raining from the ceiling, the air now rancid with the stench of sulfur and death. I glanced back, and the figure was gone, but the book's glow pulsed brighter, its light reaching for me like a hand. I climbed, my boots slipping on the slick steps, the map pressed against my chest, its warmth now scalding. The library wasn't just a place, it was alive, and it had seen me. What book would you fear most in a place like that? Subscribe to find out what happens next in the shadows. Chapter 5, The First Book. The staircase spat me back into the chamber, my boots skidding on the bone-strewn floor, each crunch a scream in the suffocating dark. My chest heaved, lungs burning with air that tasted of sulfur and ash, thick as if I'd inhaled the breath of a dying fire. The library's heartbeat thudded through the walls, a low, resonant pulse that vibrated in my bones, syncing with my own frantic rhythm. Julian's map, now crumpled in my fist, scalded my palm, its parchment radiating a feverish heat that felt like a warning or an invitation. The book on the pedestal loomed ahead, its leather cover pulsing with that sickly green glow, its carved symbols writhing like worms under skin. The whispers from before Clara had grown into a chorus, their voices slithering through my skull, coaxing, commanding. Against every instinct, my hand reached out, fingers trembling as they brushed the book's surface, cold and slick like the hide of a drowned creature. I opened it. The air shattered. A gust of wind roared through the chamber, sharp with the stench of charred bone and rotting earth, tearing at my coat like claws. The pages fell open with a sound like tearing flesh, and the world dissolved into a vision that wasn't mine. I stood in a Paris devoured by flame, its skyline a jagged ruin under a sky bleeding crimson. Notre Dame's spires crumbled, raining ash that stung my eyes and coated my tongue with the taste of despair. The Seine ran black, its surface writhing with shapes that weren't fish, too large, too wrong, their eyes glinting like the symbols on the book. Screams echoed from the streets, not human but something older, a cacophony of rage and hunger that clawed at my sanity. The vision wasn't just a scene, it was alive, pressing against my mind, threatening to pull me into its depths. I slammed the book shut, the sound a thunderclap that shook the chamber, dust cascading from the ceiling like a shroud of dead skin. My knees buckled, and I collapsed to the floor, the stone cold and unyielding, its surface slick with a film that smelled of blood and mildew. My flashlight, dead in my bag, was useless, but the book's glow cast a sickly light, illuminating the shelves that towered around me like silent sentinels. The other books stirred, their covers quivering as if waking, their whispers now a chorus of voices, some pleading, some mocking, all knowing my name. My phone's screen flickered, its battery draining despite being fully charged an hour ago, the map symbols pulsing in sync with the book I'd opened, as if they were one. A new sound cut through the din, a low, guttural scrape, like a blade dragged across stone, coming from the shadows beyond the pedestal. My heart lurched, a frantic drum beat against my ribs, the air now heavy with a stench like burning hair and rancid fat. I scrambled to my feet, my boots slipping on the floor's debris, each shard of bone biting into my solace like teeth. My phone's weak light caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow, not the tall, featureless figure from before, but something lower, more feral, its edges jagged like a tear in reality. It slunk along the shelves, its form flickering, as if it couldn't decide whether to be solid or smoke. Its presence was a weight, crushing the air from my lungs, its gaze a cold blade slicing across my skin. "Julian," I whispered, my voice a broken shard, swallowed by the library's oppressive silence. The shadow paused, and for a moment, I thought I saw eyes black, bottomless, glinting with a hunger that wasn't human. The scraping grew louder, closer, a rhythmic clawing that echoed the book's pulse, as if the library itself was waking to claim me. I backed away, my shoulder brushing a shelf, and another book fell, its cover splitting open with a wail that wasn't sound but feeling, a wave of grief and rage that slammed into my chest, stealing my breath. The vision flashed again, brief but searing, Paris burning, bodies littering the streets, their faces featureless, their mouths stretched into silent screams. I stumbled toward the pedestal, my hands shaking as I grabbed Julian's map, its heat now unbearable, scorching my fingers like a brand. The note in his hand writing the books choose who they speak to. I opened one, and it saw me, felt like a confession, a warning I'd ignored. Had he stood here, seen the same vision, felt the same dread? The shadow moved again, circling closer, its form shifting, now a hunched figure, now a mass of writhing limbs, its edges bleeding into the darkness like ink in water. The air grew thicker, the stench now overwhelming, a mix of sulfur, decay, and something sweeter, like rotting fruit, clogging my throat. I turned to run, but the chamber seemed to twist, the shelves bending inward, their books pulsing faster, their whispers now a deafening roar. "Clara, open us, know us." The shadow lunged, a blur of claws and eyes, and I dove behind the pedestal, my phone clattering to the floor, its light winking out. Darkness swallowed me, absolute and alive, wrapping around me like a living thing, its touch cold and slick, like oil seeping into my skin. The scraping stopped, replaced by a silence so heavy it crushed my chest, broken only by the book's heartbeat. thudding louder, faster, as if it knew I couldn't escape. My fingers fumbled for the map, its parchment now soft, almost fleshy, as if it were part of the library. I crawled toward the staircase, the floor's debris cutting into my palms, each shard a needle of pain. The shadow's presence lingered, a weight behind me, its breath a low hiss that grazed my neck, smelling of ash and death. I reached the stairs, my hand slipping on the slick steps, the air now rancid with the library's hunger. As I climbed, the book's glow pulsed one final time, casting a shadow that wasn't mine, a silhouette with too many arms, too many eyes, watching me flee. The library had seen me, just as it had seen Julian. And it wasn't done with me yet. If you faced a book that could show you the end of the world, would you keep reading? Like this video if you dare to turn the page. Chapter 6, Shadows Come Alive. The tunnel's darkness was a living thing, coiling around me with a weight that seemed to pulse with malice, its air thick with the rancid stench of sulfur and rotting flesh, sharp enough to sear my throat with every jagged breath. My boots skidded on the slick limestone, each step a wet slap echoing like a heartbeat in the suffocating silence. Julian's map, clutched in my trembling hand, burned with a feverish heat, its parchment soft and pliable, as if it had drunk the library's venom. The vision from the book Paris in flames, its streets choked with eyeless corpses clawed at my mind, each image a splinter burrowing into my thoughts. The whispers from below, Clara, open us, had faded, replaced by a guttural hum, like a chant from a stone throat, vibrating through the walls and into my bones. I stumbled into a narrow passage, its walls closing in like the jaws of a beast, their damp surface grazing my shoulders, cold and slick as a drowned creature's hide. My phone's screen flickered, its battery at a pitiful 8%, casting a ghostly blue glow that caught mica glints in the walls, winking like the eyes of unseen watchers. My flashlight was dead, drained by the library's hunger, leaving the map's sickly green symbols as my only guide, pulsing in sync with my racing pulse. The air grew hotter, laced with a metallic tang that coated my tongue like old blood, each breath a struggle against the stench of decay and something sweeter, like fruit rotting in a sealed crypt. A sharp scratching broke the hum, not the skittering claws from before, but a deliberate scrape, like a quill clawing parchment in a frenzy, coming from around a bend in the tunnel. My heart slammed against my ribs, a frantic drum beat, as I raised my phone, its trembling beam catching a blackened wooden door, its surface etched with the jagged circle and scar symbols from the map, glowing with a sickly pulse. The scratching grew insistent, a rhythm that clawed at my skull. I pressed my ear to the wood, its splintered grain rough and smelling of charred oak and death. The sound stopped, and a voice, Julian's, but warped, dragged through a void, whispered, "Clara, they see you." My knees buckled, the floor's damp chill biting through my jeans, as if the earth gripped my bones. "Julian," I croaked, my voice a brittle shard, swallowed by the tunnel's silence. The scratching resumed, desperate, vibrating through the door like a dying beast's groan. I gripped the rusted iron handle, its cold biting my palm, and pushed. The door creaked open, releasing a gust of air so foul, sulfur, rot, and honey over a corpse it made me gag. Beyond was a narrow passage, its walls lined with shelves holding no books, only fragments, bone shards, leather scraps, papers curling like ancient skin. My phone's light caught a note in Julian's handwriting, tucked among the debris. The shadows are the library's keepers, bound to l'ordre des ombres. I opened a book, and they saw me. Clara, don't let them see you. A shadow moved, humanoid but wrong, its limbs bent at impossible angles, its head a featureless void drinking the light. Its presence crushed my chest, a cold blade against my spine. The air thickened, reeking of burning hair and rancid fat, as the shadow glided closer, silent but deliberate. My phone died, plunging the passage into darkness, but the map symbols flared, searing my hand like a brand. I bolted, the fleshy floor sucking at my boots, each step a wet squelch that echoed my pulse. The shadow lunged, its claws grazing my arm, leaving a burning welt that smelled of charred flesh. I screamed, the sound muffled by the walls, and dug past a shelf, a leather fragment falling with the word etched in blood-red ink, Umbri Shadows. The fragment pulsed, warm and slick, whispering Julian's voice. The book summoned the shadows. Don't let them take you. The shadow slashed again, its claws missing by inches, the air hissing with their passage. The passage narrowed, walls brushing my shoulders, their dampness like a serpent's scales. I sprinted toward a faint golden light ahead, candle-like, flickering in the dark. The shadow's claws scraped the walls, a frenzied rhythm matching my heartbeat, the stench of blood and decay choking me. The map burned hotter, guiding me to the light, but the library was alive, its shadows hunting, and I was their prey. What name would a shadow whisper to you in the dark? Hit that like button if you'd keep running from the library's claws. Chapter 7, The Escape. The shadow's claws slashed my cheek, hot blood spraying the air as a scream ripped from my throat, raw and animal, echoing in the library's suffocating dark. The golden light ahead flickered like a dying star, my only hope as I sprinted through the tunnel, the fleshy floor sucking at my boots with a wet, greedy squelch that mimicked my pounding heart. The air was a furnace, thick with the stench of burning blood and rotting honey, scorching my lungs with every desperate breath. Julian's map, a searing ember in my hand, pulsed with a sickly green glow, its symbols writhing like worms, urging me toward the light. The shadows, those eyeless, writhing keepers of the library, hunted me, their skittering claws a relentless storm, their presence a cold blade twisting in my spine, promising to drag me into their abyss. The tunnel tightened, its walls closing like the jaws of a stone beast, their damp limestone grazing my shoulders, slick and cold as a drowned corpse's skin. My phone was dead, its battery drained by the library's malice, leaving the map's glow as my guide, its heat blistering my palm, as if it meant to consume me. The golden light grew brighter, revealing a jagged archway carved into the stone, its edges etched with symbols that pulsed in sync with the map, their green light now tinged with gold, like venom lit by flame. The shadow's claws scraped closer, their rhythm a frenzied heartbeat, their stench burning hair and rancid fat flooding my senses, making my stomach lurch with bile. I dove through the archway, landing hard on a stone floor that bit into my knees, the pain a white-hot flare that tasted of copper in my mouth. The light came from a single candle, impossibly tall, its flame unwavering despite the draft, casting a warm glow that felt like a cruel lie in this place of death. The chamber was small, its walls lined with mirrors, not glass but polished obsidian, reflecting not my bloodied face but distorted shapes, elongated limbs, eyeless voids, mouth stretched into silent screams. The air was cooler but heavy, laced with a scent like old roses and dust, as if the room had been sealed for centuries. My breath fogged, each exhale a cloud that lingered like a ghost, tasting of fear and ash. The shadows halted at the archway, their claws falling silent, but their presence lingered, a pressure against my skull, as if they watched from beyond the light. I staggered to my feet, my boots grinding against the floor's debris, shards of bone and paper, their edges sharp as broken vows. A rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on glass, came from the mirrors. I approached one, my reflection absent, replaced by Julian, his face gaunt, eyes black as the shadows, lips moving soundlessly, mouthing my name. My heart seized, a cold knot tightening, as I realized he was trapped not in the library, but in the mirror's depths. "Julian!" I shouted, my voice a jagged shard, echoing like a bell in a crypt. The tapping grew frantic, the mirror shivering, its surface rippling like water. Julian's hands pressed against the obsidian, leaving bloody smears that smelled of iron and decay. A crumpled note at the mirror's base, in Julian's handwriting, read, "The mirrors are doors. The shadows guard them." I tried to escape, but the library keeps what it sees. My throat tightened, bile rising as I grasped the library's predatory nature. Julian was its prey, and I was next. The mirrors shook, cracking with a sound like splintering ice, the candle's flame flaring wildly. Shadows danced across the walls, forming claws, eyes, mouths whispering my name in a chorus of hunger. I backed away, my boots slipping on the debris, each shard cutting my solace, pain a reminder of the library's teeth. The map pulsed, pointing to an uncracked mirror at the chamber's far end, reflecting a tunnel bathed in golden light. I sprinted for it, mirrors shattering behind me, shards falling like glass rain, glinting with malice. The shadows breached the archway, a writhing mass of smoke and teeth, their claws slashing the air. I slammed into the mirror, expecting cold obsidian but finding it warm, liquid, pulling me through like a riptide. The library screamed a visceral wave of rage that tore at my mind, tasting of blood and despair. I tumbled into the tunnel beyond, the mirror sealing into blank stone, cutting off the shadows. The new floor was cold, smelling of damp earth and withered roses. My breath came in gasps, the air heavy, my cheeks blood dripping, warm and sticky. The map was still, its glow gone, but Julian's note burned in my mind, the library keeps what it sees. I had escaped, but Julian was trapped, and the library's whispers lingered, soft, promising answers if I dared go deeper. What would you do if a mirror showed someone you love, trapped forever? Subscribe to follow my descent into the library's heart. Chapter 8, Secrets of Elordre de Ambers. Blood dripped from my cheek, warm and sticky, pooling in the collar of my coat as I stumbled through the golden-lit tunnel, each step a jolt of pain that echoed the library's relentless pulse. The air was thick, heavy with the cloying scent of withered roses and damp earth, like a grave freshly turned, its weight pressing against my chest, making every breath a struggle. The map in my hand, now cool but stained with my blood, felt like a traitor, its symbols dim but still faintly glowing, as if mocking my escape from the mirror chamber. Julian's trapped face, his black, hollow eyes and blood-smeared hands burned in my mind, a wound deeper than the gash on my cheek. The library's whispers had quieted, but their absence was worse, replaced by a silence so dense it seemed to hum, a predator holding its breath before the strike. The tunnel widened, its walls no longer limestone but carved with intricate relief scenes of robed figures, their faces obscured, holding books that bled ink into the stone. The carvings glowed faintly, a sickly green that matched the map symbols, their light casting my shadow in twisted shapes, like a puppet dancing on unseen strings. My boots crunched on a floor littered with ash and bone shards, each step a brittle snap that echoed like gunfire in the stillness. The golden light ahead grew stronger, revealing a circular chamber, its ceiling domed like a cathedral's, but inverted, as if designed to trap rather than uplift. In its center stood a stone table, etched with the same circle and scar symbol, and seated at it was a figure, a woman, her face half hidden by a hood, her hands folded over a leather-bound book that pulsed with a faint, unnatural light. My heart lurched, a cold knot tightening as I froze, my breath fogging in the chilly air, tasting of dust and despair. The woman didn't move, but her presence was a weight, pressing against my skull like a vice. Her cloak was tattered, its edges frayed like the wings of a dying moth, and the air around her smelled of old parchment and something sharper, like blood dried on a blade. "Clara Morrow," she said, her voice a low rasp, like leaves skittering over a tombstone. "You've come far, but the library sees all who enter its heart." I gripped the map, its edges cutting into my palm, the pain grounding me. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling but defiant, each word tasting of resolve and fear. "What is this place? Where's Julian?" She tilted her head, her hood slipping to reveal a face etched with scars, each one mirroring the jagged symbol on the map. Her eyes were pale, almost white, glinting like frost under moonlight. "I am Sister Adrienne, once of Elordre de Ambers," she said, her voice carrying a weight that seemed to age the air. "This is the Library of Shadows, a prison for the sins of humanity, bound in books that breathe and hunger. Julian came here, seeking truths he wasn't ready to face. Now he belongs to the mirrors." My stomach churned, bile rising as her words echoed Julian's note, "The library keeps what it sees." "What is Elordre de Ambers?" I asked, stepping closer, my boots grinding ash into the stone, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Why did they take him?" Sister Adrienne's lips curled, not a smile but a grimace, revealing teeth yellowed like ancient parchment. "The order was born in the plague years, when Paris burned and the books whispered to the dying. We were scholars, priests, sinners sworn to guard the library, to keep its secrets silent. The books hold every sin, every secret, written in blood and bound in flesh. They call to those who seek knowledge, but to open them is to invite their keepers, the shadows. Julian opened a book, and the shadows claimed him." The chamber grew colder, the golden light dimming, as if the library itself listened. My cheeks' blood dripped onto the floor, each drop a soft plink that echoed like a heartbeat in the silence. "How do I get him back?" I asked, my voice a jagged edge, the map trembling in my hand, its symbols flaring briefly, as if responding to her words. Adrienne's eyes narrowed, her gaze a blade that cut through me. The mirrors are their prison, but also their gate. To free Julian, you must face the shadows and the books they guard. But beware, each book you open takes something from you. Julian paid with his soul. What will you offer? She gestured to the book on the table, its cover pulsing, its leather glistening like wet skin. The air around it shimmered, heavy with a stench like burning hair and rotting meat, making my throat tighten. A faint sound, a low, rhythmic scratching came from the walls, not the claws from before but something slower, deliberate, like a pen carving words into stone. The carvings glowed brighter, their scenes shifting, showing robed figures falling to shadows, their books bleeding ink that pooled like blood. My pulse quickened, a drum beat in my skull, as I realized the library wasn't just a place, it was a living entity, its books and shadows bound to l'ordre d'ombres, feeding on those who dared to know. I backed away, my boots slipping on the ash-strewn floor, each shard of bone biting into my solace, a reminder of the library's hunger. I'm not leaving without Julian, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing my chest. Tell me how to fight the shadows. Adrienne laughed, a dry, rattling sound like bones in a crypt. You cannot fight what has no form. The shadows are the library's will, born from the sins in its books. But there is a way, a ritual, hidden in the deepest chamber, to bind the shadows and free the trapped. Find the Codex Umbrarum, the Book of Shadows. It holds the key. But it will demand a price, Clara, one you may not survive. The scratching grew louder, the walls trembling, dust falling like ash from a burning sky. The book on the table pulsed faster, its glow casting shadows that danced across Adrienne's scarred face, making her eyes glint with something not entirely human. I turned to the tunnel's exit, the golden light now flickering, as if the library sensed my intent. The map in my hand warmed again, its symbols pointing deeper, toward a darkness that felt alive, waiting. Julian was out there, trapped in a mirror, and the Codex Umbrarum was my only hope. But Adrienne's warning lingered, a cold blade in my mind. The library demanded a price, and I was running out of things to give. If a secret could save someone you love but cost your soul, would you pay it? Drop a comment to share your choice. Chapter 9, The Second Book. A whisper slithered from the darkness, not my name but a memory, my mother's voice, singing a lullaby, soft and fleeting, torn away as the library's pulse surged through the tunnel. The golden light from Sister Adrienne's chamber faded behind me, replaced by a suffocating black that pressed against my eyes like a physical weight, its air thick with the stench of charred bone and spoiled honey, burning my throat with every ragged breath. My cheeks wound throbbed, blood crusting on my skin, each drip a hot reminder of the shadow's claws. Julian's map, now cold but stained with my blood, felt like a shackle, its symbols faintly glowing, urging me deeper into the library's heart. Sister Adrienne's warning, the Codex Umbrarum demands a price, echoed in my skull, a cold blade twisting with the image of Julian trapped in the mirror, his eyeless face screaming my name. I was a journalist, driven by truth, but the library's hunger was carving me hollow. The tunnel sloped downward, its walls slick with a film of condensation that glistened like the sweat of a dying beast, their limestone etched with symbols that pulsed with a sickly green light, each one a heartbeat syncing with my own. My boots sank into a floor soft and yielding, not stone but something organic, warm, and pulsing, smelling of rot and iron, as if I walked on the flesh of the earth itself. My phone was dead, its battery drained by the library's malice, but the map's glow guided me, its heat returning, faint but insistent, like a fever stirring in my bones. The air grew heavier, laced with a sweet, nauseating scent, like flowers left to decay in a sealed crypt, clogging my lungs until every breath felt like drowning. A faint hum broke the silence, not the guttural chant from before but a melodic drone, like a choir trapped in a dream, coming from a cavern ahead. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling a jagged vault of stalactites, dripping with a viscous liquid that plinked onto the floor, each drop a metallic tang that stung my tongue. The walls were lined with shelves, not of stone but of bone, their surfaces carved with the same circle and scar symbols, glowing brighter now, casting my shadow in twisted, writhing shapes. In the center stood a pedestal, not stone but ivory, polished to a sheen that reflected the chamber's light like a mirror. On it rested a second book, its cover not leather but something softer, almost human, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the hum, its title etched in blood-red ink, Liber Sanguinis, Book of Blood. My heart slammed against my ribs, a frantic drum beat, as I approached, the map's glow flaring in my hand, its symbols burning my palm like a brand. The hum grew louder, now a voice, not Julian's but something ancient, its tone sweet yet venomous, whispering, "Open me, Clara, know the truth." My mother's lullaby flickered again, a memory so vivid I smelled her lavender perfume, felt her warm hand brushing my hair. I reached for the book, my fingers trembling, the air around it shimmering with heat, heavy with a stench like burning flesh and wilted roses. Sister Adrienne's words clawed at me. Each book takes something from you, but Julian's face in the mirror, his silent scream, was louder. I opened the book. The chamber exploded in light, a crimson blaze that seared my eyes, the hum rising to a scream that wasn't sound but feeling, a wave of agony and ecstasy that tore through my mind. I was no longer in the library but standing in my childhood home, the air thick with lavender and the coppery tang of blood. My mother lay on the floor, her throat slit, her eyes wide and lifeless, staring at me as they had when I was 9, when I found her after the robbery that took her life. But this wasn't a memory, it was alive, twisting, her lips moving, whispering, "You failed me, Clara." The room shifted, walls bleeding, the air choking with the stench of death, and I saw myself, older, broken, holding a knife, my hands red with her blood. I screamed, slamming the book shut, the sound a thunderclap that shook the chamber, stalactites cracking above, their liquid raining down, burning my skin like acid. I collapsed, the floor's fleshy surface yielding beneath me, warm and slick, smelling of rot and iron. My vision blurred, tears mixing with the blood on my cheek, the taste of salt and despair flooding my mouth. The book's glow pulsed, its hum returning, softer but insistent, promising answers if I opened it again. The map in my hand flared, its symbols now red, not green, as if the book had marked it and me. A new sound emerged, a low, wet slither, like a serpent dragging itself through mud, coming from the shadows beyond the pedestal. My pulse raced, a hammer in my skull, as I staggered to my feet, the floor's pulse quickening beneath me. The slither grew closer, and a figure emerged, not the eyeless shadows from before, but something worse, a mass of writhing tendrils, its surface glistening like raw flesh, its eyes countless and black, glinting with hunger. It spoke, its voice a chorus of screams, not words. "You opened the book of blood. Now you owe a debt." The air thickened, the stench now overwhelming, blood, rot, and lavender choking me until I gagged. I backed away, my boots sinking into the fleshy floor, each step a wet squelch that echoed my terror. The tendrils lunged, their tips grazing my arm, leaving welts that burned like fire, smelling of charred skin. I ran, the map guiding me to a narrow tunnel beyond the chamber, its walls pulsing with the same red glow as the book. The creature's slither followed, its voice a scream in my mind, "Give us your blood, Clara." My mother's face flashed again, her accusing eyes searing my soul. The library wasn't just hunting me, it was rewriting me, and I had opened its second door. What memory would a book like that steal from you? Hit the like button if you dare to face its truth. Chapter 10, The Price of Knowledge. My mother's bloodied face surged from the dark, her lifeless eyes accusing me as her slit throat gurgled my name, the liber sanguinis' crimson glow searing my vision like a brand. The tunnel's air was a choking mire, thick with the stench of rotting lavender and molten iron, each breath a blade raking my lungs raw. My cheeks wound pulsed, blood crusting into a stinging mask, while Julian's map, now cold and brittle, crumbled in my hand, its symbols etched into my palm like a curse. The library's pulse thrummed through the walls, a low, relentless heartbeat vibrating in my bones, as if the earth hungered for me. The tendril creatures scream, "You owe a debt, Clara," twisted with my mother's voice, shredding my memories into something monstrous. I was a journalist, forged to chase truth, but the library was unraveling my soul, thread by bloody thread. The tunnel sloped upward, its walls jagged bone, not limestone, carved with symbols glowing a sickly red, pulsing like open wounds. My boots crunched on ash and teeth, each step a sharp snap echoing like a neck breaking in the suffocating silence. The air turned icy, laced with a scent of frozen roses and rusted metal, as if the library exhaled winter's decay. The map's symbols flared faintly, guiding me to a low archway, its bone frame etched with the circle and scar symbol, now red, not green, as if claimed by the liber sanguinis. Beyond, a silver light flickered, cold as moonlight trapped in ice, unlike the warm candlelight of before. I ducked through, entering a circular chamber, its walls smooth and glassy, reflecting my bloodied face in fractured shards, eyes hollow, mouth twisted, hands dripping red. The air was sharp, slicing my lungs with a chill that tasted of frost and despair. At the center stood a stone altar, veined with red like a torn heart, holding not a book but an obsidian shard, its jagged edges glinting with a silver hum, a mournful note burrowing into my chest. The map flared, pointing to the shard, as if it held Julian's freedom. My hand hovered over the obsidian, its surface freezing, burning my skin with a jolt that tasted of ash and blood. The hum became a voice, ancient and venomous, whispering, "Pay the debt, Clara, give us your truth." My mother's lullaby surged, not a memory but a presence, her lavender scent choking me, her warm hand now cold, clawing my heart. I gripped the shard, its edges slicing deep, blood gushing hot and sticky, pooling on the altar in a crimson flood. The chamber roared, walls rippling, the silver light exploding into a blinding blaze that tore through my mind. My mother's face appeared, not dead but alive, her eyes pleading, her voice screaming, "Why did you let me die, Clara?" The memory of finding her body, her blood soaking the floor, my 9-year-old screams twisted, alive, her hands grabbing me, pulling me into the void of her death. I screamed, my voice a raw, guttural howl, the shard cutting deeper, my blood streaming, each drop sizzling on the altar like acid on flesh. The library's pulse surged, a deafening heartbeat shaking the chamber, stalactites cracking above, raining shards that stung my skin like hornets. My mother's memory ripped from me, not fading but torn, a jagged wound in my soul, leaving a hollow where her lullaby once lived. I collapsed, the floor's bone surface biting my knees, warm and pulsing, smelling of rot and iron. The shard's light dimmed, but Julian's face flickered in a glassy wall, not clawing, but standing, his eyes brown, not black, pale but human, as if the library had loosened its grip. The shard clattered on the altar, its hum fading, leaving a warmth in my bloodied palm, like a cruel promise. A note lay beside it, inked in blood, not Julian's hand, "The library takes what you love. The Codex Umbrarum lies deeper, where shadows rule. Pay again, or lose all." My chest heaved, the void of my mother's memory a crushing weight, heavier than the blood on my cheek. The map flared, its symbols faint, pointing to a tunnel beyond, its darkness colder, deeper, smelling of death and secrets. Julian was still trapped, and the library demanded more. My legs trembled as I stood, the loss of my mother's memory a wound bleeding inside me. The Codex Umbrarum waited, its price unknown, but I had nothing left to give, or so I thought. Would you give up your most precious memory to save a friend? Hit the subscribe button to see if I can save Julian. Chapter 11, The Choir of the Damned. A child's laughter, sharp and wrong, erupted from the darkness, slicing through my mind like a blade, not mine but hers, my sister's, lost to me years ago, now twisted by the library's hunger. The tunnel's air was a suffocating veil, reeking of scorched lavender and rusted iron, each breath a jagged splinter tearing at my throat. My cheek's wound throbbed, blood crusting into a stinging mask, while Julian's map, brittle as ash, crumbled in my grip, its red symbols pulsing faintly, like dying embers in a forgotten fire. The library's pulse pounded through the bone-carved walls, a relentless heartbeat shaking my core, whispering Julian's name and my doom. The Codex Umbrarum lay deeper, its price a shadow over my soul, and the void of my mother's memory stolen by the library gaped like an open wound, bleeding despair. The tunnel curved, its walls no longer bone but glassy obsidian, their surfaces reflecting not my face but fractured glimpses of my sister, her eyes black, her laughter a mocking echo. My boots scraped a floor of shattered mirrors, each shard glinting with a sickly red light, cutting into my solace, the pain a white-hot flare tasting of copper and fear. The air grew colder, heavy with a scent like frozen roses and rotting flesh, as if the library exhaled a winter's grave. The map's symbols flared, guiding me to a low, arched doorway, its frame woven from roots that pulsed like veins, oozing a black sap that smelled of decay and sweet decay. The child's laughter grew louder, not one voice but many, a chorus of the lost, calling me forward. I pushed through, the roots brushing my skin, their touch cold and slick, like fingers of a drowned corpse. The chamber beyond was vast, its ceiling a dome of twisted bone, dripping with a viscous liquid that plinked onto the floor, each drop a metallic tang stinging my tongue. The air thrummed with a low, melodic hum, not the guttural chant of before but a hymn, sung by unseen voices, their tones sweet yet venomous, weaving my name into their song. At the chamber's center stood a circle of figures cloaked, motionless, their faces hidden in shadow, their hands clutching books that pulsed with a crimson glow. The floor beneath them was etched with the circle and scar symbol, its lines bleeding red, as if the stone wept blood. My heart slammed against my ribs, a frantic drum beat, as I stepped closer, the map trembling in my hand, its symbols burning my palm like a brand. The hymn grew louder, the voices now a choir, not human but something older, their song a weight crushing my chest. Clara Morrow, one figure intoned, its voice a chorus of screams, not words, vibrating through my bones. You seek the Codex Umbrarum. Face the choir of the damned, or join us. The figures raised their books, their covers glistening like wet flesh, and the hymn became a scream, conjuring flashes of my sister's laughter, her small hand slipping from mine in a crowd, her face fading into the dark. I clutched the map, its edges cutting my palm, blood dripping onto the floor, each drop sizzling like acid. "Where's Julian?" I demanded, my voice a raw shard, echoing like a bell in a storm. "What are you?" The lead figure's cloak rippled, revealing a face not human but a mask of bone, its eyes hollow, glinting with a hunger that wasn't alive. "We are the damned, bound to El Ordre de Ombres, keepers of the library's sins," it said, its voice a blade slicing my mind. Julian sought the Codex to end the library's hunger. He failed, and his soul sings in our choir. Answer our question, or join him. The hymn shifted, now my sister's laughter, her voice accusing, "You lost me, Clara." The chamber trembled, the bone ceiling cracking, black sap raining down, burning my skin like fire, its stench a mix of sulfur and death. "What question?" I asked, my voice trembling, tasting of salt and dread. The map flared, its symbols pointing to a book in the lead figure's hands, its cover etched with my sister's name. My stomach lurched, bile rising as I realized the library wasn't just a predator, it was a weaver, spinning my pain into its song. "What is your greatest sin?" the figure asked, its voice a chorus of screams, shaking the chamber. The other figures stepped closer, their books opening, pages flipping with a sound like tearing flesh, each one revealing glimpses of my life, my mother's death, my sister's loss, my failure to save them. The hymn grew deafening, a wave of guilt and grief that threatened to drown me. I staggered, my boots slipping on the mirror-strewn floor, each shard cutting deeper, the pain a reminder of my failures. I let them die," I whispered, my voice breaking, tears mixing with the blood on my cheek. The choir's hymn paused, the figures freezing, their books pulsing faster. The lead figure tilted its bone mask face, its hollow eyes glinting. "Truth opens the path. The Codex Umbrarum lies in the Chamber of Shadows. But the library demands more. A note fell from its cloak, not paper but skin, inked in blood. The Codex binds the shadows. Speak your sin, and pass or sink forever. The map flared, pointing to a tunnel beyond the choir, its darkness absolute, smelling of death and secrets. I ran, the hymn resuming, a scream that tore at my mind, my sister's laughter chasing me. The figures didn't move, but their eyes followed, their books glowing brighter, as if the library itself sang through them. I was a journalist, but the truth was breaking me, and the Codex Umbrarum was my last chance to save Julian or lose myself. What's the one sin you'd never confess, even to save a life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Chapter 12, The Plan to Seal. A bone snapped under my boot, its crack splitting the tunnel's silence like a gunshot, the jagged shard piercing my soul, sending hot blood seeping into my sock. The air was a suffocating fog, thick with the stench of scorched lavender and rancid blood, each breath a blade shredding my throat. My cheek's wound throbbed, crusted blood stinging like a brand, while Julian's map, now brittle as ash, crumbled in my grip, its red symbols pulsing faintly, like embers in a dying fire. The library's pulse pounded through the bone-carved walls, a relentless heartbeat shaking my core, whispering Julian's name and my doom. The Codex Umbrarum lay in the Chamber of Shadows, its price a shadow over my soul, and the void of my mother's memory stolen by the library gaped like a wound, bleeding despair. The tunnel twisted downward, its walls no longer bone but writhing roots, their surfaces oozing a black sap that burned my skin with a touch, its acrid scent stinging my nostrils like acid. My boots sank into a floor of soft, pulsing flesh, each step a wet squelch echoing like a heartbeat in the oppressive dark. The map's symbols flared, guiding me to a rusted iron gate, its frame etched with the circle and scar symbol, glowing a deep crimson, like veins under skin. The gate groaned as I pushed, its hinges screaming like a wounded beast, releasing a gust of air so foul sulfur, rot, and spoiled honey it made my stomach lurch, bile rising in my throat. Beyond lay a cavernous chamber, its ceiling a jagged vault of bone stalactites, dripping with a viscous black liquid that plinked onto the floor, each drop a metallic tang stinging my tongue. The air thrummed with a low, mournful hum, not a choir but a dirge, sung by unseen voices that wove a thread of dread into my bones. At the center stood a stone table, veined with red like a torn heart, holding a tattered scroll, its parchment yellowed and curling like ancient skin, etched with the circle and scar symbol in blood-red ink. A note lay beside it, in Julian's handwriting, smeared with blood. The Codex Umbrarum holds the ritual to seal the library. It demands your essence. I tried, and failed. Clara, don't let it take you. My heart slammed against my ribs, a frantic drum beat, as I unrolled the scroll, its parchment warm and pulsing, smelling of blood and decay. The words, written in a script older than Latin, glowed red, detailing a ritual to seal the library, bind the shadows with your essence, seal the gate with your will. The price is your core. My journalist's drive, my need for truth was all I had left, but Julian's face in the mirror, pale but human, burned in my mind. The ritual required a sacrifice, not a memory, but my essence, the fire that made me Clara. Sealing the library would trap its shadows, protect the world, but Julian might remain lost, his soul bound to the mirrors forever. The chamber trembled, the bone ceiling cracking, black sap raining down, burning my skin like fire, its stench a mix of sulfur and death. A shadow moved, not the choir or tendrils, but a formless mass, its edges flickering like a flame, its eyes countless and black, glinting with hunger. It spoke, its voice a scream that wasn't sound but feeling. Choose, Clara. Seal the gate, or save your friend. My throat tightened, the taste of salt and despair flooding my mouth. I clutched the scroll, its warmth searing my palm, and whispered, "I'll seal it." The shadow froze, the scroll flaring, its light swallowing the chamber, and I felt my essence, my drive, my fire begin to unravel, a thread pulled from my soul. The chamber stabilized, the shadow vanishing, the air now heavy with a scent like burned roses and fresh earth. Julian's voice came from a mirror on the wall, clearer now. "Clara, your clothes." The scroll crumbled, its ashes falling like snow, but the map flared, pointing to the chamber of shadows, where the Codex Umbrarum waited. The ritual had begun, but the library demanded more, and I was fading, my essence bleeding into the dark. I stumbled toward the tunnel, my legs weak, the void in my soul heavier than the blood on my cheek. The Codex Umbrarum was my last hope to save Julian, or trap us both. If you had to choose between saving one person or the world, what would you do? Hit the like button if you'd face that choice. Chapter 13, The Final Ritual. The library's pulse surged through me, a violent jolt that stopped my heart for a split second, my bloodied foot throbbing as if the tunnel itself had bitten me. The air was a choking haze, thick with the stench of scorched lavender and molten iron, each breath a jagged blade shredding my lungs. My cheeks wound burned, crusted blood flaking like ash, while Julian's map, now a crumbling relic, pulsed faintly in my hand, its red symbols glowing like dying coals. The library's heartbeat thundered through the bone-carved walls, a relentless drum that shook my core, whispering Julian's name and my doom. The Codex Umbrarum waited in the chamber of shadows, its price a guillotine over my soul, and the void of my mother's memory ripped away by the library bled despair, leaving me hollow, my journalist's fire fading. The tunnel plunged deeper, its walls no longer roots but living flesh, their surfaces writhing with red veins that oozed a black sap, its acrid scent searing my nostrils like acid. My boots sank into a floor of pulsing tissue, each step a wet squelch that echoed like a dying heart, the warmth crawling up my legs like a parasite. The map's symbols flared, guiding me to a massive bone gate, its frame etched with the circle and scar symbol, glowing a deep crimson, like a wound that refused to heal. The gate groaned as I pushed, its hinges screaming like a banshee, releasing a gust of air so foul sulfur, rot, and spoiled honey it made my stomach lurch, bile flooding my throat. Beyond lay the chamber of shadows, a cavern vast and cold, its ceiling a vault of jagged bone, dripping with a viscous black liquid that plinked onto the floor, each drop a metallic tang stinging my tongue. The air thrummed with a low, mournful dirge, not voices but a vibration, like the earth itself wept. At the center stood a stone altar, veined with red like a torn heart, holding the Codex Umbrarum, a book not of leather but of living skin, its surface pulsing, etched with symbols that bled red ink. A scroll lay beside it, inked in blood, not Julian's hand. Seal the library with your essence. Speak the ritual, bind the shadows, close the gate. The price is you. My heart slammed against my ribs, a frantic drum beat, as I approached the altar, the map trembling in my hand, its symbols searing my palm like a brand. The dirge grew louder, a scream that wasn't sound but feeling, conjuring flashes of Julian's face in the mirror, pale, human, but fading. The ritual demanded my essence, my core, my will to live, the last spark that made me Clara. Sealing the library would trap its shadows, protect the world, but Julian might remain lost, his soul bound to the mirrors. The codex pulsed, its hum whispering, "Speak, Clara," and it, my sister's scream flashed, not a memory but a presence, her small hand slipping from mine, accusing me of failure. I clutched the scroll, its parchment warm and pulsing, smelling of blood and decay. The words glowed red, a chant in a tongue older than time, Sanguis meus, umbras lega. Anima mea, portus claude. My blood, bind the shadows. My soul, seal the gates. I spoke the words, my voice a raw shard, echoing like a bell in a storm. The chamber roared, the bone ceiling cracking, black sap raining down, burning my skin like fire, its stench a mix of sulfur and death. The codex flared, its light swallowing the chamber, and I felt my essence tear, not a memory, but my will, my fire, ripped from my soul like flesh from bone, a pain so raw I screamed, my voice a howl that shook the walls. The shadows rose, not one but a legion, their forms writhing masses of claws and eyes, glinting with hunger. They lunged, their claws grazing my arms, leaving welts that burned like acid, smelling of charred flesh. I chanted louder, the words cutting my throat, blood dripping from my lips, each drop sizzling on the altar. The codex pulsed faster, its pages flipping without touch, each turn a scream that tore at my mind. Julian's face appeared in the air, not a mirror but a vision, his eyes brown, pleading, "Clara, finish it." The shadows screamed, their forms dissolving, sucked into the codex like smoke into a void. The gate trembled, its crimson glow fading, sealing with a groan that echoed like a dying beast. I collapsed, the floor's pulsing flesh yielding beneath me, warm and slick, smelling of rot and iron. The codex dimmed, its hum fading, but the scroll crumbled, its ashes falling like snow. My essence was gone, my soul a hollow shell, but the library was sealed, or so I thought. Julian's voice came again, faint, from the tunnel beyond, "Clara. I'm here." My legs trembled as I stood, the void in my soul heavier than the blood on my cheek. The map was gone, burned to ash, but the tunnel beckoned, its darkness absolute, promising Julian's freedom or my end. If you had to sacrifice your will to save the world, would you speak the words? Hit the subscribe button to find out what lies beyond the gate. Chapter 14, Legacy of the Shadows. The library's final scream tore through me, a visceral wave that shattered my senses, as if the earth itself howled my name. The tunnel's air was a suffocating mire, reeking of scorched lavender and congealed blood, each breath a jagged blade slicing my lungs. My cheeks wound pulsed, blood crusted into a stinging mask, while my foot, pierced by bone, throbbed with every step, leaving a trail of warm, sticky red. The map was gone, burned to ash, but its crimson symbols lingered in my mind, glowing like embers, pointing to Julian's faint voice, Clara. I'm here, echoing from the darkness. The Codex Umbrarum had sealed the library, but its price, my essence, my will, left me hollow, a shell driven only by the need to find Julian. The library's pulse had faded, but its shadows lingered, their whispers promising freedom or death. The tunnel descended, its walls no longer flesh but blackened stone, their surfaces etched with the circle and scar symbol, now dim, like scars fading on a corpse. My boots scraped a floor of shattered bone, each crunch a sharp snap that echoed like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. The air grew colder, laced with the scent of frozen roses and rusted iron, as if the library exhaled its final breath. A faint silver light flickered ahead, not the golden glow of before but cold, like moonlight trapped in frost. My legs trembled, the void in my soul a crushing weight, heavier than the blood on my skin. The library was sealed, but Julian's voice called, faint and human, pulling me deeper. I stumbled into a circular chamber, its ceiling a dome of jagged bone, no longer dripping but cracked, as if the library's heart had stopped. The air was heavy, smelling of ash and decay, each breath tasting of despair and dust. At the center stood a single mirror, not obsidian but silver, its surface rippling like water, reflecting not my face but Julian, pale, eyes brown, alive. He pressed against the mirror, his hands leaving no blood, his voice clearer, Clara, you did it. My heart lurched, a faint spark in the hollow of my chest, as I ran to the mirror, my fingers brushing its surface, cold and slick, like ice kissed by a flame. Julian! I shouted, my voice a raw shard, echoing like a bell in a crypt. The mirror shivered, its surface pulsing, and Julian spoke again, you sealed the gate, but I'm still here. His eyes met mine, not black but human, filled with fear and hope. The library's sealed, but the mirrors hold me. You need to break it? My throat tightened, bile rising as I realized the ritual hadn't freed him, it had trapped him in the mirror, a prisoner of the library's last gasp. A note lay at the mirror's base, not paper but skin, inked in blood. The library is sealed, but its shadows linger. Break the mirror, free the soul, but the price is eternal vigilance. The air thrummed, not with the library's pulse but a new sound, a low, rhythmic scratching, like claws on glass, coming from the mirror. The chamber trembled, dust falling like ash from a burning sky, and the mirror's surface rippled faster, Julian's image flickering, his face twisting as shadows moved behind him, their eyes glinting with hunger. I grabbed a bone shard from the floor, its edge sharp as a blade, cutting my palm, blood dripping hot and sticky. The scratching grew louder, a frenzied rhythm, and the shadows in the mirror lunged, their claws grazing Julian's image, his scream silent but searing my mind. I swung the shard, striking the mirror, its surface shattering with a sound like ice breaking under a hammer. The chamber roared, the air thickening with a stench of sulfur and death, as Julian stumbled forward, real, solid, collapsing into my arms. His skin was cold, his breath ragged, smelling of earth and fear, but he was alive. The shadows screamed, a wave of rage that wasn't sound but feeling, tearing at my mind. The chamber shook, bone stalactites cracking, falling like spears, their tips grazing my shoulders, leaving welts that burned like fire. I dragged Julian toward the tunnel, his weight heavy, his voice weak. "Clara, you can't leave. The library's sealed, but it needs a guardian." My stomach lurched, the note's words burning in my mind: eternal vigilance. The ritual had sealed the gate, but the library's shadows lingered, and someone had to stay to keep them bound. We stumbled upward, the tunnel's walls closing in, their blackened stone pulsing faintly, as if the library still breathed. The air was heavy, smelling of ash and frozen roses, each step a struggle against the weight of my hollow soul. Julian clung to me, his eyes haunted, but human. The silver light faded, leaving us in darkness, but a faint glow from above daylight beckoned. We emerged into the crypt beneath Notre Dame, the gate sealed behind us, its crimson symbols dim. The library was silent, but its shadows watched, waiting for a crack in the seal. Julian and I sat in the crypt, the air cold and still, smelling of stone and secrets. "You gave everything," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Your mother, your will," I nodded, the void in my soul a weight I'd carry forever. The library was sealed, but I was its guardian now, bound to watch the gate, to ensure its shadows never woke. Paris lived above, oblivious, while I carried its secrets, my essence the price for its safety. What would you give to seal a darkness forever? Share your story in the comments below.